As Americans and many others across the world show solidarity with the African American community in the US who've had enough of racism and police brutality, the recent killing of an autistic Palestinian by Israeli forces in occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds, has given momentum to a movement called Palestinian Lives Matter, which has attracted public support to the brutality Palestinians face in the hands of Israeli forces in the occupied territories.
Israeli police forces, and even though he was buried, we will not let his murder be covered.
In the besieged Gaza Strip, protesters have rallied outside the UN office in Gaza City holding pictures of Floyd and Halak.
عليه إننا في الاتحاد العام للهيئات الشبابية ومجموع جسور للتواصل الدولي لنؤكد على ما يلي. أولاً، نعبر مرة أخرى عن تضامننا الكامل مع السود في الولايات المتحدة وغيرهم من الأقليات في معركتهم من أجل الكرامة والمساواة، وندين بأشد العبارات هذه الممارسات العنصرية البشعة ضدهم. ندعو المؤسسات الدولية ومنظمات حقوق الإنسان والعالم الحر إلى تكريم المواطن الأمريكي جورج فلويد والفلسطيني إياد الحلاق واعتبارهم شهداء الحرية والإنسانية على المستوى الدولي.
The advocacy group Palestine Institute for Public Diplomacy said Iyad and George were victims of similar systems of supremacy and oppression. They must be dismantled. Meanwhile, Beit Salam says justice for Iyad is unlikely. The rights group noted that during the past 9 years, investigations by Tel Aviv into similar killings of more than 200 Palestinians by Israeli forces led to only 3 troops being convicted. Hashtag Palestinian Lives Matter has gone viral after the killing of Iyad al-Halik, the autistic Palestinian. Here are some of our favorite comments. Telling her every mistake, says the US President, the Republican Party and the Democrats and every other US leader needs to cut all economic ties with the Israeli Prime Minister and Israel. This is apartheid. This is genocide. Days of Palestine, they've been in touch. Being a Palestinian is a crime you have to pay for. Palestinians are not numbers to count and their lives matter. Syrian girl, I expect worldwide protests over Israel's killing of Ahmed, referring to another Palestinian killed by Israeli forces, and the genocide that is the annexation of the West Bank. Or do Palestinian lives not matter? Moving on to Maximiliano Edo, who says to the West, Israeli lives matter more than Palestinian lives. It's a very powerful point. Alfred Alpha says, I won't say that Palestinian lives don't matter. It's more like any lives that aren't of a certain influential ethnic group don't tend to get that much attention, which is also very true. And Stephen Ramos, the Zionists are the ones preventing the truth from being shown, referring there to the mainstream media in the West and elsewhere, some would say. And finally, to our last post of this show, Sadiq Haqiqat says to the US, to the life of Israelis is more important than US's blacks. Another viewpoint. That was social media, and here is the voice of the Palestinians in the occupied territories.
جريمة الاحتلال الصهيوني التي نفذها بحق الفلسطيني المقعد إياد الحلاق تأتي ضمن سلسلة جرائم صهيونية بحق الفلسطينيين كالضرب والاعتقال والتنكيل، وهي تأتي بموازاة جريمة الشرطة الأمريكية بحق المواطن الأسود فلويد.
طبعا الاحتلال الإسرائيلي ما في يوم من الأيام تعامل مع الشعب الفلسطيني بشكل إنساني ولا أي شكل من أشكال الإنسانية. جريمة اغتيال الشاب المقعد إياد الحلاق لم تكن الأولى ولا الأخيرة.
إن الاحتلال الإسرائيلي مهما الذي يقوم بسرقة الأرض وسرقة التاريخ الفلسطيني وسرقة الأرض الفلسطينية، هذا الاحتلال الذي لا يتوانى للحظة واحدة عن اقتراف الجرائم بحق الشعب الفلسطيني، فهو موجه احتلال مجرم، احتلال سارق للأرض. والإدارة الأمريكية التي تقف من خلفه.
العدو الصهيوني قد أجرم وقد بالغ في إجرامه ضد الشعب الفلسطيني، فلا يمكن وصف إجرام هذا العدو بحق شعبنا الفلسطيني على مدار السنوات الأخيرة.
بالتأكيد الكيان الصهيوني والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية هم وجهان لعملة واحدة. بالتأكيد الكيان الصهيوني يأخذ دائما الضوء الأخضر في ممارساته ضد الشعب الفلسطيني من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية ومن أيضا بعض الزعامات العربية المطبعة مع الكيان الصهيوني.
بلا شك أن العقيدة السياسية للاحتلال الأمريكي والاحتلال الإسرائيلي هي واحدة، ونستطيع القول أنهم وجهان لعملة واحدة. وما حصل مؤخرا من قتل وسحق جورج فلويد وكسر حرية التعبير ونفس الأسلوب ونفس المشهد تكرر في فلسطين مع الشهيد إياد الحلاق. هذا يوضح لنا مدى همجية هذا العدو ومدى تكبر هذا العدو واستعلائه على القوانين الدولية.
نرى أن إسرائيل تقتل وتدمر وتسلب وتحرق وتسلب الأغوار. بالأمس كان هناك قصف في غزة، قصفوا وأرعبوا النائمين، أرعبوا الأطفال.
Israeli police killing of an autistic man in occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds, has drawn parallels with US police violence. It has been recently revealed that the officers from the US police force responsible for the killing of George Floyd received training from Israeli police officers. The killing of an autistic Palestinian man in the hands of Israeli soldiers triggered a similar movement for Palestinians. Palestinian lives matter. One difference between the African Americans and the Palestinians is that the US is not under occupation, but Palestine is, which means rarely are such crimes acknowledged by the Israeli regimes. Palestinian Lives Matter has caught the attention of the media around the world. Here are just some of those headlines. Mona Issa is a political commentator and she joins us now. Mona, welcome. In the aftermath of the brutal murder of George Floyd in the US and Iyad al-Halak in occupied Jerusalem, Al-Quds, what parallels can you draw between the US police and Israel's occupation forces?
In order to draw parallels between these two, we have to look at the foundations on which they've been built. So if we're going to look at America and we're going to look at the so-called State of Israel, we seek their history, which has been incrementally fabricated to give authority figures a heightened sense of self, a delusion of grandeur, or even a superiority complex. And all of these things lead to a power dynamic, a very vast one, which only increases with time, between the civilians and these authority figures, which also leads to supremacy. In this case, we have white supremacy and Jewish supremacy. Except that in America, they call it urban policy, and in the the so-called State of Israel, they call it settlements. What these two have in common is that they both function on marginalization, annexation, arbitrary killings, which are all part of the system. And in order to build on this point, there is increasing evidence that actually they take after each other, meaning that the IDF actually traveled to America to learn tactics on how to deal with the drug war. This is how they describe it. And the Americans, the police force, they go to Israel in order to learn how to deal with terrorists. So their tactics are shared, and in fact, they are two sides of the same coin.
Right. What can you say about this racism that further emboldens the Israeli forces to behave in the way that they do against the Palestinians?
I would say that for many countries around the world and many societies, racism is a social issue that can be mitigated through workshops or through talking about it. People can heal from these things. However, when the entire when the entire foundation of your identity is based on thinking you are God's chosen person, or hating and justifying the killing of an entire racial or ethnic group, then your identity is racist, and therefore your so-called state is racist. And therefore you need a new identity, because your identity cannot coexist peacefully with any given identity on this planet. So what we're trying to depict here is that Israel and racism go hand in hand. They are inseparable, and you cannot have one without the other. So in order to destroy racism, especially in this part of the world, you have to uproot Israel from its artificial roots, its lab-created, its US-sponsored roots. And this is how we could possibly think about any sort of peace negotiations. And of course, it will be on our terms.
Mona Issa, political commentator, activist, thank you very much for your contribution to Palestine Files. Powerful statements there. Dear viewers, we're going to take a short break and be right back with the rest of the show. Palestinian protesters have gathered in front of the Church of Nativity in the occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem to protest the oppression against African Americans in the US and the aggression of Israeli forces against Palestinians.
نقول لكل شعوب العالم ولكل الأحرار في العالم وخاصة للشعب الأمريكي ما حصل لديكم من قتل وتمييز عنصري لدى جورج أيضا يحصل في فلسطين ولكل شهداء فلسطين. أيضا وضعنا صورة الشهيد إياد الحلاق اليوم الذي لا يمكن تفرقته عما حصل في أمريكا والنظام الأمريكي الذي قتل جورج. أيضا النظام الصهيوني أيضا يقتل كل يوم جورج في فلسطين.
Palestinian artist Taqi Sapatin has painted a mural of George Floyd on the apartheid wall built by Israel in the occupied West Bank.
هلا كل العالم عم بينادي بالعدالة وبتحقيق العدالة من أجل المساواة بين الأعراق وألوان البشر بسبب الحادثة اللي صارت في أمريكا اللي توفى فيها راح ضحيتها جورج فلويد اللي انخنق بطريقة بشعة جدا يعني ومؤذية للبشرية. فأنا فعليا تأثرت لأنه إحنا بنحس بألم هاي الصح. ما في عنا كثير ناس ماتوا من هذه الخنقة أو من هاي الحركة لكن صارت كثير عنا.
Other rallies have also been held across the occupied territories. In this protest, Palestinians with disabilities have held up signs and a banner reading, "People with disability can't breathe." Analysts say colonial settler projects in the United States and occupied Palestine cooperate on many issues. Apart from being strong military allies, US police officers train with Israeli regime forces. Observers say the life-threatening chokehold used on George Floyd and others was brought to America by Israeli instructors and is regularly used by the regime against Palestinians. Time to bring in our second guest of the show. Natalie Strecker is an activist and campaigner with the Jersey Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. Natalie, welcome. In your opinion, why doesn't anyone pay the price in occupied Palestine? New research has found that out of 200 killings alone of Palestinians under the hands of Israeli soldiers, only three have been convicted.
I think it's pretty simple, as unfortunately with all colonial projects around the world, you have a situation where the indigenous population have been dehumanized to an extent where their life is considered to hold very little value. If we look at the state of Israel, it's been built on very similar foundations to the United States, with racism as its cornerstone. If we look at the United States, it was built on the ethnic cleansing and genocide of the Native American people. And of course, it was built then on the African slaves. Well, Israel is slightly different, but it's built on very similar foundations, which is racism and, of course, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. I often think if you look at, obviously, Zionism as a political ideology, you may be able to understand perhaps why such an ideology came into being after the Jews suffering centuries of persecution, of course. But whatever Zionism may have meant to some people, or maybe what some people hoped it would be, we know that in practice for Palestinians, what it means is continual ethnic cleansing and, like I said, incremental genocide. For Palestinians, there can be no argument that it is a political ideology of ethnic supremacy. So I think when you, as a society, have this belief, as the white South Africans would have had, you're indoctrinated into believing that other humans are less human than you are, then obviously their life becomes cheap. So then it's easy to make the decision to take a Palestinian life. If the Israeli people, and the soldiers are brainwashed into believing that every Palestinian is a terrorist and therefore their enemy, then of course it's going to be very easy to kill, whether it's Iyad al-Halak, paramedic Razan al-Najjar, or even more recently Ahmed Erekat.
So obviously you're saying that Israel acts above the law, behaves above the law. Do you think the Palestinians will get the justice one day that they deserve?
Well, as I learned in Palestine, I suppose the first thing we have to say is, inshallah, what I will say is that what I can witness, certainly in the years that I've been within the Palestine Solidarity movement, is that the tide is turning. Obviously, the annexation looks like, I believe, that it probably will go through, and this is going to make life harder for the Palestinians. But if we're honest, the facts on the ground have already proven that the annexation had already happened de facto, and obviously the apartheid system has already been operated. It's just going to worsen that, and I think that, I suppose the difference in terms of annexation is just that it will formalise what's already happening. And from an Israeli point of view, from their viewpoint, it will give a semblance of legality. But of course, that won't hold up under any international law, under any scrutiny. But I think in terms of, can there be justice, is there ever going to be true outrage on a global scale? I would say absolutely yes. And I think that my belief is that it can happen. I just recently read an excellent article by Yoav Litzkin with veteran Black Panther Aaron Dixon. And what he said, and I think this is really vital for us, is you need to link what is happening in the US and actually other movements around the world to what is happening with Palestine and Israel. I think all grass movements need to do that and link it to Palestine, the situation in Palestine and Israel and all other colonial white supremacist projects. It's really important important to really educate people about intersectionality and the real importance of understanding what that is, and just really to build that grass movements up. You know, I think obviously it's frightening for us when we look at the world at the moment. It seems that as a global community we're slipping into fascism, and of course that is frightening. You know, all the signs are there. However, we need to just look back to other people in the past and be bold and courageous just as they were, and to keep speaking out no matter what the cost, no matter what the price for us. We have to be brave, and we keep speaking out until that freedom, justice and equality comes. And I think it can come, not just for Palestinians, but of course that needs to be, it's an injustice that's gone on far too long, but for all people of colour around the world, you know, whether that's in Kashmir or, you know, Tibet, even the Chagos Islands, all these kind of other places. So absolutely, inshallah, we will see it come. We just have to keep going.
Natalie Strecker from the Jersey Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Thank you very much for joining Palestine Files. Appreciate it. So, do Palestinian lives matter to Israel? How far is Israel willing to go to brutalize the Palestinians into surrender? How much more can the Palestinians endure as the rest of the world keeps silent? This next exclusive case study will answer these questions and more.
The only threat Iyad al-Hallaq posed to the Israeli occupation forces is the fact that he's Palestinian, native Palestinian. Exactly the same way Native Americans posed threat to settler colonialism in the United States of America, and the same way African Americans as well pose a threat to the imperialist regime in the United States of America. And the only reason that apartheid Israel decided to kill Iyad al-Hallaq is that they want to get rid of the natives of Palestine altogether. And the comparison is that both systems in the United States of America and in apartheid Israel are settler colonies. And you know, in settler colonies, the settlers dehumanize the natives of the land. And this is the only reason why apartheid Israel decided to kill Iyad al-Hallaq, and why the white supremacists in the United States of America decided to kill George Floyd. What happened in South Africa is that they created a system of apartheid, racial segregations between the colonizer and the colonized. In Palestine, what has been going on since 1948 until today is a process of ethnic cleansing, where also the native is dehumanized. Social media activists play a very important role in raising awareness about the suffering of the Palestinian people, in the way they try to create an alternative outlet that mainstream media ignores. You know very well that in Palestine we suffer from a multi-tiered system of oppression. One, occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, apartheid in 1948 Palestine, and you know, ethnic cleansing and settler colonialism. The role that is being played right now by social media activists is that they tell the international community about this form of multi-tiered system of oppression.
Observers do believe that the Israeli regime forces are no less brutal or racist than the police in the United States. There, they shoot African Americans whose blood appears to be cheap. And in the occupied territories, Israeli forces shoot Palestinians whose blood is evidently even cheaper. Thank you for watching Palestine Files. Until next time.